Hi, and welcome to the Sew Homey Podcast. My name is Abby, and this is a podcast all about knitting and crochet. I do have a passion for both, and I am diving deep into the design worlds of these two crafts, so I'd like to take you along with me on that journey. So this journey will include a lot of my own patterns that I'm working on that I will self-publish, but I also find that I learn best by working through other people's patterns. So I will highlight all of the designers and talk a lot about their patterns that I have personally finished or been working on. So that's kind of what you can expect to see around here. I will show you the finished objects that I finished throughout this month, which will be February, but also the work in progress. So what are the projects I've been working on that I haven't finished just yet, and new additions, which unfortunately I don't have any this episode. I actually feel a little more accomplished than I normally do this month, and that's just because I had more time on my hands to dedicate to knitting, and that's because the weather decided not to play nice. So I live in the panhandle of Texas, and basically the entire state of Texas was hit by a giant winter storm a couple of weeks ago, and I'm a nanny for a family in town, and schools closed obviously because of the weather. The weather conditions were really bad, so schools were canceled and the kids didn't have to go to school, which meant I got an entire week off. So I was able to do a lot of knitting, which worked out for me. It made me happy, and I was able to produce a few more videos in the past couple of weeks because of that. So you can check out my normal channel for that if you're interested in some knitting crochet tips, and there is a new tutorial out there, which I'll get to in a little bit. But anyway, I was talking about the weather. So I tried to go out and play in the snow, as you could see from my little intro, but that's about all I could withstand, was like maybe 20 minutes. My hands and feet were frozen. They felt like they were gonna fall off. So I stayed out there long enough to draw a few hearts because it was Valentine's Day, and I don't know, I thought it was a good idea to go outside and try to play in the snow. Not a good idea. So I came right back in and I started a fire, and I basically stayed inside for the rest of that week because it was way too cold, and I knit for hours on end. So that brings me to the finished objects portion of this episode, because while the weather decided to not play nice, I was able to knit my first pair of socks. So let me talk a little bit about the pattern before I show you what it looks like, because my first attempt was quite comical, but it's by no fault of the pattern at all. So I chose a pattern by Tin Can Knits. It's called Rye Light, and you should definitely check it out. And I forgot to mention, but all of the links to the designers, the patterns, the materials, whatever, I'll keep all of that in the description box below, so you can check that out after this episode. But again, I did choose a pattern called Rye Light by Tin Can Knits, and I found it just through browsing Ravelry. But really what drew me to it was the diagrams on the pattern. It was a free download, so I looked through it, and for some reason I've always had a hard time comprehending how you actually knit socks, especially with DPNs, because I knew that you knit in the round with them, but I was really confused at how you got from the cuff and like leg portion to the heel. Like, how did you turn it to make it have that L shape? But they really made it easy, because they had, say, like they drew like the cuff portion, and that's what you'd be knitting on for a section, and then the next section is where you did the heel flap. So they would draw where the heel flap was and have a diagram there, and then the next section, when you turn for the heel, they would just add those different sections, and it really helped me visualize what I was actually doing when I was knitting. So I was really drawn to the pattern because of that, and as a beginner, that's really what I was looking for. Also, in the pattern, for the different techniques, different stitches, just basically something that a beginner probably would not know, they had links to, and it went straight to their blog where they wrote articles and had a lot of pictures and really good descriptions on how to do those techniques. So I was really happy with that because there were several techniques that I didn't know. Just for example, slip knit. I have heard the term and I've seen it, but I didn't actually know how to do it. I didn't know that you slipped knitwise and then you knit that way. I don't know if that makes sense, but I didn't know what that was, and so their blog post on that really helped me out. The one thing I will say, I did look up videos for my second sock because I did have a lot of errors. So I did look up videos to help me with certain parts of the sock, just because the written portion didn't give me, I guess, enough tips to avoid those mistakes that I did make. So the first sock I made completely just going by the pattern, the written pattern, whatever they had in the pattern. If there was a link to something and I didn't know how to do it, that's what I did. I followed that. And I was able to successfully knit a sock. And wow, was that a feat. I'm really impressed that I was able to. So the pattern is really great. I highly recommend it if you are a first-time sock knitter. And if you want to hear or read, I guess, a little bit more about what I thought, the mistakes I made, I did create a project in my Ravelry on my page so that I could always go back to this since it was my first time knitting socks. It's just exciting, and I like to go back and read through and just see how far I've come and help anybody else out if you choose to do this pattern. Definitely look through that because there's several tips in there that I would have given myself had I knit socks before. I don't know. Those are tips that I would have given myself before I started knitting these socks. So definitely go read that too. So the first sock that I cast on, I have it written here. I cast it on the 3rd of February and I finished it about 2 weeks later on the 14th. So this was my first sock. This was my first attempt at knitting a sock, and I'm super proud that it actually looks like one. So again, it was knit cuff down. So I started here. The ribbing was done with 2.25 millimeter double pointed needles, and then I switched to 2.75 millimeters to finish the rest of it. And it's chock full of mistakes, but you can at least tell what it is. And I apologize for my little sock blocker. I don't actually have one, so I makeshifted one out of cardboard. I think it does the job, but this was the sock. So I wanted to talk through some of the mistakes. So maybe if you've never knit socks and you've always been curious, maybe this will help you and inspire you to actually try it out, because it is a lot of fun. I see why there are people that only knit socks. But anyway, so first off, I didn't read through the entire pattern apparently, because this part, the front of the foot, was supposed to be in garter stitch, and I completely did it only in purl stitches. So I purled a lot more than I had to, which is unfortunate, but that was first mistake. I'm not blaming the pattern at all. It had nothing to do with the pattern. It's just because I was not paying attention. So that was one mistake. And then also the way that I read how to cast on my stitches, that I needed to have them evenly distributed. I had it where the purl stitches here for those rows, it was split onto 2 different DPNs, and I didn't know what laddering was, but I do now. And that's what you get right here. If you see that line, and then there's some up here too, just where you get big gaps, and that's caused because where the DPNs cross and where you finish and then insert your empty needle to continue on the next needle, your tension gets off sometimes. So normally you don't see this while knitting, because you can just pull on the yarn and make it tighter, and it will minimize that gap and you won't even notice that it's there. But with a purl, it's completely different, and unfortunately, the tighter you pull, the bigger the gap is, and I did not know that from starting out. So on my second sock, which I'll show you, I did a lot better. I did find a technique on how to eliminate that. So that was the first mistake. Second mistake is pretty obvious, and that's pretty common actually on socks, is just that hole at the gusset. So this is caused because of how the stitches are pulled, and I ended up with one because I was supposed to pick up only a certain amount of stitches, and I thought if I did more then it might mess up my sock. But now that I actually went back and looked at things, that's not the case. It doesn't really matter if you pick up an extra stitch or two. You just have to decrease them out to end up with the same number of stitches as what the pattern says. You just have to do a couple extra decrease rows, and it won't really affect the sock, and you won't have a giant hole like I do. Sorry. And actually, I'm working on creating a video that has tips for first-time sock knitters. So basically things that I would have told myself before I started knitting a pair of socks. So stay tuned for that video. I will highlight a lot of the things and show you actually what to do, just so that you can avoid the mistakes like me. So that was a mistake. Also, count your stitches. I don't really know how those holes happened. I don't know if you can see those, but there's giant holes just along the side of the foot, and I guess I dropped stitches or picked them up and then dropped them again. Somehow I ended up only on one side though. I'm not sure. It's probably inattention. But yeah, unfortunately that happened. And then also on this side of the gusset, I don't think, whenever I picked up the stitches, I don't think I picked up the slip stitches, like both legs of the slip stitches. I think I only did it on one, and that's why the big gaps were caused. And then I need to weave in the ends and actually learn how to properly do that, because I got yarn in the front whenever I tried to hide that one. But that was my first attempt at knitting socks, and I am proud of it. I will keep this forever just to remember all of the mistakes that I made, and just see how much progress I made, I guess. So this was my first sock, and I did end up knitting 3 of the same exact sock, and that's because that one was not wearable, and I wanted to actually complete a pair of socks because I like to wear a lot of socks around the house, and I wanted to see how the yarn felt and how it would wear as socks, since I had never knit with it before. So this is my second sock, which I must say looks a lot better than the first one, which is expected. I'm really happy with this one. The only thing is I cast on too loosely. I didn't pull those stitches tight enough whenever I cast on, so the ribbing at the top and then the rest of the sock just ended up bigger than my other one, or than my other 2 actually. So it fits my foot and it fits my leg, but it fits a little loosely, so not completely happy with that, but it does fit. It's fine, and I'll wear it around the house, no big deal. And you can see I actually did the garter section. I actually paid attention to that. There was only like one place where I purled too many times, but I noticed it, and it's kind of at the where it kind of folds at the foot almost, so you can't really tell whenever it's on. And then on the sides, I pretty much was able to eliminate the gap. I don't know if you can see that, but there's really no gaps on the gusset part. Yeah, this one's like completely, you can't even see a hole. I was able to avoid the holes just because of advice that I found via YouTube. So I'll link that video. That really helped me to close the gap whenever I picked up my stitches to continue with the foot part. What else about this sock? Oh yeah, so this one I was talking about how you get ladders, and in this sock, this is where it was split on this side between 2 DP ends, and you can't even really notice a difference in tension. Maybe just like a few places it looks a little looser, but that is because whenever your DPNs are crossed and you have your purl stitches split between the two, and after you knit an entire purl row and then you want to go on to the next row where the purl stitches start that row, instead of using your empty needle, you just want to use that same needle that you were just knitting onto and knit 2 of the purl stitches with that same needle, and then you can transfer them to the empty needle and continue in the pattern and just continue down knitting that row. And that really helped to eliminate the ladder. There wasn't like any gaps at all. I was really impressed. It did take a little bit more time, but if you do have problems with laddering whenever you use double pointed needles, I would definitely suggest that. And I don't even remember where I found that, but I'll find an article or something and I'll link that as well. But I'm going to add that into my little tips video, so stay tuned if you want to see that. And then I have to show you my third sock, same exact pattern again. I just wanted to complete a pair of socks that were wearable. So this is my third sock, and you can see that it's quite a bit smaller. I'm happier with this one just because I like my socks to be a little more tight especially at the cuff, the ribbing part, because I like it to stay on my foot or on my leg. So I'm happier with that. And I did do the complete garter stitch. I was able to do that. But on this sock, rather than keeping the purl stitches split, I actually kept them on the same needle and just knit them that way, and kept in mind that that's what I did so that I wouldn't accidentally mess up somewhere. So I was aware of that, and I was happier with that than the previous way just because it didn't take as much time, and I was able to avoid any laddering that way. And then there's like one mistake that I can show you, and that is because I purled a little too far. However, I was too lazy to rip back a couple of rows, so I just left it. Again, I'm just going to wear them around the house, so probably only I will notice that. But I was able to avoid any holes in the gusset as well on this sock, so I'm very proud of this one. It looks pretty good in my opinion. And yeah, so that was my first attempt at knitting socks, and I'm super pleased with it. Highly recommend the Rye Light Socks if you're a beginner knitter to socks. The next finished object that I would like to talk about is an original pattern by myself, and I did show you that in the last episode. Actually, I was in the process of making them. So it's a placemat that's round, and it is crochet. You start with the magic circle, and then you use the stitch half double crochet in the third loop, and you do it in the round. And they are continuous rounds, not joined, but I'm still working on writing up this pattern because it's been a project I've been working on for so long. I just wanted to find the way to get the perfect circle, and with crochet that is actually kind of difficult at times. I think it's because of the yarn weight. I'm kind of trying to figure out the reason actually. I did find a way for this yarn, which I used 3 strands of crochet thread to get this texture, and it's got a nice width, it's got a nice weight to it. It's pretty drapey fabric, but it does do well as placemats, and it will keep my table from getting scratched. And holding 3 strands together, I just purchased 3 different balls of it, and then held one ball at a time and just crocheted off of that, and I was able to get 5 placemats out of all of that yarn, which is quite impressive actually. I was kind of hoping to be able to get 6 out of it, so that was another thing I was testing whenever I was making this. I wanted to see how many I could actually get out of it, but yeah, unfortunately only 5. I was hoping 6, but yeah, that's about, or that is just for the size that I made too. If you made a smaller one, obviously you'd be able to get more out of it possibly, And then if yours are bigger, you would be able to get less, I guess. But I'm still working on getting this pattern written up, but as soon as it is written, I will get it published and I'll put it on my Etsy shop and my Ravelry page as well. So those are my second finished objects. Super happy with them. And then my third and final finished object for this episode is my blanket. Okay, sorry, I have to grab it. So this one I called the Arctic Throw, and I did show you this one in the last episode as well, I believe. But this is the blanket, and it has this nice fringe. I actually finished it, and the pattern is actually live. It's on my Ravelry page. I'll link it down below. But it uses Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick yarn. So it's a very chunky blanket, and you use the seed stitch. So you're alternating knits and purls every stitch, and then every row you alternate that. So a knit and a purl, it just alternates all the way up and then all the way across as well. And then you add the fringe at the very end. You put them on the cast on and bind off edges, and you can choose to add as many as you'd like. And I did add a video where there's 3 different types of fringe, so you can choose what kind of fringe you'd like. And so this is my throw. I really like it. It's really soft and squishy, and honestly sometimes I'll sit on the ground and I just like to use it as a little cushion because it's so squishy. And yeah, so it serves as a cushion and a blanket, I guess. But yeah, so that was my other finished object. Really happy with it. And if you are interested, actually, if you've never knit before, I did create a tutorial on it as well. That's through my YouTube channel. If you just go to my homepage, you'll be able to find this pattern, and I walk you through step by step how to do it. And then if you want to pick up a copy of it, I list several options in that video as well. Now we can move on to the work in progress portion of this episode. And I only have one, and it's another pair of socks. So I'm going through my stash just because it's been cold for one, so I don't want to go out anywhere. Today is actually pretty nice, but I'm trying to go through my stash and find patterns that I can use that yarn for. Unfortunately, a lot of the yarn I just have one skein, and I've got to find out some way of using it up. And some of the color choices, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Sometimes whenever I was beginning, I would just pick up one skein that I liked, and the colors don't even match. So I just have a lot of odd colored yarn, different textures. They're not all the same. So I've got to figure out something to do with it. But since I knit my first pair of socks, I found this yarn in my stash, and luckily I picked up 2 balls of it. I think I was planning on crocheting a pair of gloves. I think that's what I was thinking, but now I'm going to turn it into a pair of socks. The label got ripped off, but I think it's Croy Socks by Patton's yarn. So I think it's 100% superwash wool. Not entirely sure, but I really like the way that it works up. It's got a nice self-striping pattern, and I think it'll be a nice sock. And for this one, I decided to try a different kind of sock. I'm doing a toe-up sock. So that's where you start at the toe. The pattern I'm following, let me see. I have it pulled up here. It's called Simple Toe-Up Socks, and it's by the designer Carmen, I think you say Yorison. I'll link her below and her pattern, but it's a free pattern, and she takes you right to your blog. You can find it on Ravelry. And she takes you right to her blog, and she created this series of videos to help you knit your own pair of socks, starting with the toe up method. And it's really, really easy to follow. I've really enjoyed it a lot. I'm impressed by the cast on because you can't even see like a break or anything. You don't see a line or anything. I'm really impressed by it. So I can't wait to finish one to see how it fits. And it looks really narrow, but I'm hoping it stretches around my foot. I do like them tighter, so hopefully this will work. So as I mentioned before, I actually don't have any new additions, including yarn or tools. I don't have any of that in this episode, but I didn't want to leave you empty-handed. I do have some pretty yarns that came from my stash that I would like to feature here on this section of the episode. So I told you that I've been wanting to knit socks for the longest time, and this past summer is really where I was inspired, I guess, to knit socks. I had been watching people knit socks in podcasts. I'd seen a lot of pretty patterns on Instagram and Ravelry, and so I picked up some yarn while my dad and I were in Colorado. We took a camping trip up there, and we ended up in Pueblo, but took a day trip to Colorado Springs, and he was kind enough to take me to some of the local yarn shops there, and I was able to pick up 2 skeins of yarn and a couple sets of knitting needles, but I don't have to show you those. Those are nothing exciting at all. So the 2 skeins that I picked up are sock yarns because I did have the plan to knit socks, but I didn't want to use up the pretty skeins before testing out socks first, because I wanted to know that I could actually do it and not have a sock full of mistakes and mess up the pretty yarn. So now that I think after I finish up the toe up sock, I can decide on what pattern I want to use, whether it's a cuff down or toe up sock. And I think I'll feel a lot more comfortable using this pretty yarn to knit myself a pair of socks. So the first yarn that I want to show you is this one. It looked really pretty, it looks really pretty here caked up, but it's got a lot of purple and brown tones. There is some orange and red in there as well. But I think it'll be a nice sock yarn. I don't know if I'll use a contrasting color. I might try to find one that matches with it so that I can try a 2 different colored sock. I've seen a lot that I like, so I might do that with this one. But this one was by Sweet Tea Yarns, and she calls it twist sock, and it's 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon, and it comes with 400 yards. And her colorway is called Autumn Woods. So that was one that I picked up, and it's really soft, and I think it'll make a really good pair of socks. And then the next one I picked up because of the color. If you can't tell, if you've watched any of my other videos, a lot of the title sections and things I use mustard yellow. It's like my favorite color, so that's why I picked up this one. And unfortunately I wasn't able to get this one caked up. The lady got super busy, so I told her that was okay. I would just take it like this. But this one's 85% superwash merino wool and 15% silk. So I wanted to see the difference between using nylon and silk, so I got 2 different ones. And I do plan on making socks with these as well. And I haven't decided if I want to do a contrasting color or not on this one either. But this one's by Cascade Yarns, and that is the label. I'm not sure of the colorway, but I don't think it has a colorway, but it's 437 yards approximately. But yeah, so I can't wait to try these out with socks. I really have fallen in love with socks. I definitely see how there are sock knitters out there. Maybe I'll become one, I'm not sure, but the only thing with socks is that making the exact same thing twice is very difficult for me. So I showed you that in my first pair of socks, one's bigger than the other one, but hopefully I will get better at replicating the same thing. And also going through the pattern once and then having to go through the pattern again for 2 socks, sometimes I get bored of that. So I might give socks a try and then, just keep socks on the needles and then be working on something else. I might end up with that. That way my socks might be a project that I do on the go, and then I have one at home that's maybe like a sweater or something. I don't know. Normally I'm a monogamous knitter / crocheter, and I like to just do one project at a time because otherwise I don't ever finish the one project if I'm doing 5 at a time. So that's my problem. I think I've been rambling on for far too long. I can really feel it in my throat. I need to go get a drink of water. But before I sign off, I would just like to ask you, if you liked this video and you found it helpful, please hit that like button. It really lets me know that you like it, and I do appreciate that. Also, feel free to subscribe to my channel so that you are kept in the loop whenever a new podcast episode airs or any other videos that I release in that month. You'll also be able to see them there. And thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you watching this, and I will see you guys in the next episode.